I want to share with you about the mathematical code, about the holy grail that Giza offers, about Stargate travel, space travel, the numbers 3, 6, 9, 8, 13, which are the magical numbers that code up our entire existence, our entire mathematical blueprint on so many levels. Back in 2009, I was in New Zealand and I had an experience where I was taken in a spaceship. I was meditating in my friend's pyramid, in a copper pyramid with my eyes open, and a little space pod landed in the garden. Previous to this encounter, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing spiritual teacher in human form back in the UK. And this beautiful soul taught me how to remote view, how to bring my light out of my body and travel, how to tap into the multi-dimensional playing field, how to extract data, etc. So when this space pod landed in the garden next to this pyramid, a blue being in there, I brought my light out of my body, went and jumped in the spacecraft, and this being placed my consciousness on the other side of a portal. And then the space pod flew through the portal, and it's like it caught up with my consciousness. It's the only way I can describe it. When I got to the other side, I was over water. Got out of the space pod, there was a beach. I walked up the beach. There were hundreds of blue beings. They were Lyrans. I was on Alpha Centauri. I'd never heard of Alpha Centauri. I'd never heard of Lyrans, but I just knew they were Lyrans, and I knew I was on Alpha Centauri. They hugged me, and I experienced the most overwhelming sense of love that I've ever experienced. They took me through this like jungle area beyond the beach to this pyramid made of light, and I went inside and met, the only way I can describe it is like a chief or an elder, this really ancient blue Lyran being. And I knelt down on the floor, and all of this orange light poured down from my crown, and there was all of this kind of like fluid, flowing, geometrical code. It had no solid structure, not like the geometry that we see in textbooks and that sort of thing. It was this ebbing fluid geometry, but it had a very specific kind of structure, but fluid structure. And I had this download of code, and then it stopped. I don't know how long it went on for. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. I had no sense of time. But when it stopped, two of these Lyrans, they picked me up under my arms and kind of marched me back to this base pod, stuck me inside, went back through the tunnel, back in to my friend's garden, went back into the pyramid, like back into my body, back into the meditation. A couple of years later, to cut a long story short, we ended up moving back to England, and I started seeing fairies, having contact with angels, and I was told to write a book called Into the Light about my life. So I wrote that, and then when I wrote it, I started seeing all of this geometrical code. Same code that came in this orange download on Alpha Centauri. I was asking my guides, what am I supposed to do with this stuff? And they were telling me I was being lazy and I needed to meditate more. So I started getting up every morning with my son Josh. I homeschooled my kids. So I was getting up every morning with my son Josh, and we were going into these meditations and into these ancient mystery schools underneath the pyramids in Egypt. And when I got there with Josh, there was loads of other human beings there. I'd look around the classroom. We all sat at these old little kind of desks, and those ones you get when you're like kids at school. And there was a man at the front of the room, and he told me that his name was Thoth. And Josh and I went 2 hours every day for 9 months. And when we were there, this being that called himself Thoth was getting out these scrolls. And on the scrolls, there were codes. And he was showing us how to use codes to heal people. And after the class each day, Josh and I would go exploring around the pyramids. And underneath the pyramids, we found these healing pools, these healing chambers. We found spacecrafts. We found like massive levels, only way I can describe it, which were like cities under the ground. And we'd explore them. And these healing pools, I mean, back in sort of like 2014, 2015 now, we discovered these healing pools. When we started Star Magic, a couple of years later, which is our business, the healing frequency we train people in. One of the things that we train people in is how to take people to these healing pools underneath the pyramids. And the results that people get are amazing. When you go under there, there's 3 pools, and next to the pools there's like a stone table. It's a bit like a healing bed, and these Egyptian light workers come out with these crystal healing rods, and they stick them into people, and they carve people up, and they remove tumors, all sorts of things. I had a guy who was in hospital years ago, and the doctors told him that he'd be lucky to make it through the next 24 hours. And if he did make it through the next 24 hours, they were going to have to cut 10 feet of his intestine out and put a colostomy bag, so he'd have to poo and wee into it for the rest of his life. Anyway, he did make it through the next 24 hours. They pumped him full of medication. They set a date for February for him to go into hospital and have his intestines cut open and this colostomy bag put in. Anyway, I think this was like just after Christmas, and he contacted me during the Christmas period. He found me on YouTube and he asked me if I would do some healing on him. I went in to do the healing, and we ended up taking this guy to the healing pools in Egypt. And if you go to the Star Magic website, you can watch his testimonial. What happened in his account was that he woke up in a room. He knew it was Egypt. He was on this stone table, and he said he felt my hand going into his body. He had diverticulitis, E. coli, peritonitis. He had 3 tumors in his belly. He said that he felt my hand go into his belly where the major pain was, and when he woke up, he had a big scar across his stomach. It wasn't actually my hand. I just watched the Egyptian surgeons with their crystals. They cut his belly open, took the tumors out, recoded his system, and when he woke up, he saw the scar and he took a photo of it. And so you see it on the website when you go and watch the testimonial. But anyway, he went back to the doctors and they ran the tests on him. There was no tumors, no E. coli, no peritonitis, no diverticulitis. He was completely healthy. He looked like 20 years younger. And the doctor said, "What have you done?" He said, "I've had a spiritual operation." And they said, "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working." But this is the kind of stuff that happens in these healing pools. This is what Thoth was teaching me and my son. He taught us so much. He showed us so much about the mathematics of the universe. He explained to us that years ago, God, infinite intelligence, source, got curious and started out from its own consciousness creating these creator beings that God's source, infinite intelligence, sent out into the universe to create. And these creator beings started creating planets and galaxies and worlds and universes and different dimensional fields, and everything was beautiful for thousands and millions and billions of years. And then these creator beings, they started getting curious. So instead of creating with the original fractalized geometry, the original source codex that they were given to create with, they started playing around with it and started playing around with their own code. So they started creating fractals of fractals. And to cut a long story short, this is where the frequency shifted, and we call it dark and light. It's just different variations of vibration. But what happened over a long period of time, all of these different planets and worlds and universes were being created, but consciousness was falling and deteriorating. I'm not sure whether deteriorating is the right word, but falling down through the dimensional fields. And what Thoth showed to us was that they created a structure to stop the falling consciousness. And the structure that they used to stop the falling consciousness was Metatron's cube. Metatron's cube is a cubed geometry, and there's 13 spheres inside of it. And this is why the number 13 is so important. So they stopped the fall of consciousness with Metatron's cube. Before this fall, like Mother Earth, she was a crystal planet. It wasn't solid, she was just vibrational light. And then when they dropped through the densities, through those dimensional layers, she became more solid. And really, it's not really solid, it's just vibrating at a different frequency, but it seems solid, just like our bodies. But this cubed structure with the 13 spheres was a beautiful thing that was stopping and holding and stopping the falling consciousness going any further down. But what happened over a long period of time is we became acquainted and accustomed to this cubed structure. And so our whole multi-dimensional time matrix, which consists of multiple dimensions, many stargates, different systems, trillions of planets, it's huge, got stuck inside this cubed structure. And the only way out of this cubed structure is to spiral out of the cubed structure. When you move through the multi-dimensional fields, you change dimensions at 90-degree angles. And that's cool, you can move through the dimensional fields, but you're only ever going to stay in the cube. To get out of the cube, you've got to spiral out of the cube. And so, whilst Metatron's cube is a beautiful thing that stopped the falling consciousness, we also became entrapped in it. But it's like if you build a house, you're going to build a doorway out of that house. So the cubed structure had a doorway. And the doorway, the secret code to that doorway is the 13 spheres. And to spiral out of that cube, you have to activate your multidimensional Merkaba field, which is 10 tetrahedrons, 5 male, 5 female. Those 10 tetrahedrons, they form a 12-pointed star. Those 12 points, they link into 12 DNA strands. They link into the 12 stargates. They link into 12 of your multidimensional chakras or multidimensional transmission centers, we call them in star magic. Now, when those 12 points spin, those 10 tetrahedrons, the 12-pointed star, when it spins, it creates a sphere. The sphere becomes the 13th point, the 13th piece on the grid, which plugs in through the heart. It also plugs into your 13th multidimensional transmission center or multidimensional chakra. It also plugs into the 13th stargate. Okay, there's so many levels and layers to this. So the multidimensional Merkaba field, the 12 strands of DNA become 13. 12 stargates become 13 because the 12 always create the whole. Just like Jesus and his 12 disciples, the 13. Everything's encoded mathematically. Now, once you plug into the 13, you then got to times it by 3 because you've got 13 constellations in our zodiac, which plug in to all of these different structures of 12 and 13. But within each zodiac sign, there are 3 constellations, 3 structures. So each zodiac sign pulls the 3 into it. And when you pull those 3 into it, it activates the body in a very specific way. Now, if you go into the King's Chamber and you look at the measurements on the King's Chamber, it's measured in cubits, but if we break it down to meters, it's much easier to understand. So the pyramid itself is 5.24 meters by 10.48 meters by 10.172 meters. Now those numbers break down to 11, 11, 13. If you add 11, 11, 13 together, you get 35. 35 equals 8. 8 is infinity. 8 is that spiral of light. 8 is that never-ending infinite code. And so the King's Chamber itself is an access point to all of these Stargate systems, through all of these constellations, through all of these structures. When you're in the King's Chamber, there's a gateway up to the God worlds. Now, if you look at the box inside the King's Chamber, the Ark of the Covenant fits inside of it. In 2022, I hired the whole pyramid for myself for my birthday. I've been in there bundles of times, large groups, and we've done many activations in the well, Queen's Chamber, King's Chamber, different light language transmissions, meditations, various different kind of activations and beautiful ceremonies. But I knew I had to go in my own, and I wanted to do it the year before, but it never worked out. So I planned to go in on the 8th of March on my birthday. When I got there, my friend who'd organised it for me told me, well, you can't go in on your birthday. You need to go in on Friday. And on Friday the 11th at 11 p.m, all the lights were off in the pyramid. I went down into the well, up into the Queen's Chamber, did some work, and then went up into the King's Chamber. When I was in the King's Chamber, I saw an electromagnetic version of the Ark of the Covenant slotting into the sarcophagus, into that box. And all of these electrical frequencies activated. I watched them plug into the different pieces of the walls. Now all of those walls are encoded with various different star systems, very specific, like numerological codes. Okay, the numbers are everything. The mathematical code in this is absolutely crazy, phenomenal, precise. So I'm lying in the floor of the King's Chamber, and the sarcophagus was to my right, and my feet were facing bang on the wall in front, my head was facing back. Now, when this King's Chamber activated, all of the walls disappeared. Remember, it's dark. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. All of the walls completely disappeared, and there were just portals opening up everywhere. And the beings that were coming through, there were high frequency beings and darker beings. I don't really get scared. I'm always completely sweet. But there was a point I had to breathe and say, you got this, Jerry. Because they were walking around my head, I could hear them, it was crazy. They were there. Loads of them as well. I don't know how many. There were so many that I couldn't even count them. And I got taken out of my body. And I went up through this bend in space-time through a very specific sequence of stargates. Now, the stargates that I went through were stargates 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 12. So 3 is the planetary stargate that's linked in through the Giza chamber. Now, if you break the numerology of these stargates down, you end up with 35 again. So I was lying in my body, I got taken up out of my body, and I rose up through the top of the King's Chamber, went up through the capstone and through this stargate bend in space-time. And they took me through stargates 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 12. Now, when you add the numerology of this together, you get 35. 3 and 5 is 8. So you've got the measurements in the King's Chamber breaking down to that numerology of 8. You've got the bend in space-time that takes you up through the Arimatina Gateway, Stargate 12, and into the God Worlds, dimensions 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then eventually 19, 20, and 21, the God Worlds, the primary light fields, the primary sound fields, and then the God Worlds, pure source. So this number 8, this infinity, is encoded into the bend in space-time to move through that very specific Stargate structure. And that bend through the Stargates is like an arc. And so the Ark of the Covenant is what activates the chamber, but then it opens up the bend in space-time, the true vibrational arc that takes you up into the God Worlds. When I was up there, I was shown so many things. It was very hard to compute it when I came back down. When I came back down into my body, my legs were facing the opposite way, minus 23 degrees. And I know they say that the world's, or the planet's axis is off 23 degrees. When I came back down, I was facing the other way. Now, I don't know whether my body turned, did the pyramid turn, did the planet turn? I don't know. I don't remember any movement because I was up there, I was out of my body. But when I came back down and I was facing the other way, I got up and I was pretty disorientated. I had to take a moment to really recalibrate. When I came back round, all of those stargates and portals from within the chamber had closed and the walls were back again. We here on planet Earth must work a way out and off of this planet, but not only off of this planet, but out of this time matrix, which is multiple dimensional fields. And the way that we can take our bodies and our consciousness out is through this Stargate structure. And the mathematics are what's important. Even if you go back to the Masons and you look at the number 33, okay? Number 33 is plugged into the code of Mach 33, which is 33 times the speed of sound, which is 11.2 kilometers per second, which is the speed that you need to accelerate to get off the planet and up into space. 11.2 kilometers per second. 11 plus 2 is 13. That 13 code's coming back in again. 33 is 6, which is that Queen's Chamber, divine feminine frequency. That number 6 is the 528 frequency, the color green, the middle of the rainbow. Chlorophyll vibrates at that 528 frequency. The code and frequency coming out from our sun, 528. This code is everywhere. When you get the color of the rainbow, the colors that we see, and then you start to tap into the fractals of that and you expand it through the dimensional fields and you see the multiple color ranges, you realize that this 528 frequency vibrates and fractalizes out infinitely. And the colors shift and become more translucent, but that 528 frequency holds the center line all the way through. It's always about finding that balancing point. The reason that we struggle on this planet is because our own frequency is a little bit off. Our own mathematical code, our own geometry is a little bit off. Even if you look at nature, if you look at our physical bodies, the code is off. And this is what Thoth was showing us. When you want to exit this time-based matrix, remember we're stuck inside this cubed structure. If you want to exit this time-based matrix, you got to go through a spiral. Okay, you can only spiral out of a cube. If you move through the dimensions at right angles, you'll get stuck inside the cube. You're going to be in another level or dimensional field within the cube structure. To get out of it, you've got to spiral out, and you've got to spiral out at 45 degrees. 45 is 9. Okay, true crystalline code that spirals out from the source point is a 45-degree rotation. Now, a lot of people get stuck in their heads. If you close your eyes and you look up at a 45-degree angle, and then you bounce your consciousness off the front of your head and back to the top of your head at 45 degrees, and then back towards the back of your head at 45 degrees, and then 45 degrees again, you create this crystal spiral inside of your head. The thoughts immediately stop, and your consciousness spirals out, and you literally expand through the multi-dimensional playing fields. This spiralistic code is the way out of your head, and it's the way out of this multi-dimensional time matrix that we're playing and living this game of life inside of. And it's a beautiful game, and there are so many levels and layers to this game. We as humans have to understand the mathematical code. Now, what Thoth showed me was something incredible. Thoth showed me this code, R44 RX3. Now, when you break the mathematics and the numerology of R44 RX3 down, it breaks down to 53. 5 and 3 is 8. It comes back to that bend in space-time. It comes back to the size of the King's Chamber. This infinity code is everywhere. Now, when you place this code that I've just shared with you, R44 RX3, into an octahedron and put it in your right hand, and you bring up the hologram of another human being, and you entangle that hologram with a human being, and you place your right palm with the octahedron in front of their feet, a beam of light comes out in between their feet. It creates a little sphere. The sphere creates 18 spokes. 1 and 8 is 9. Around those 18 spokes is linked with a wheel of light. 18 more electrical streams flow into the heart of the human being, and what they do is they trigger the platonic solids. Now, the platonic solids, they appear over the human being's hologram. Once you get that icosahedron and you wrap it inside of the octahedron, and you wrap it inside of the tetrahedron, inside of the cube, and then the dodecahedron, finishing with that 12-sided pentagonal dodecahedron. So you nest those platonic solids inside of each other. If you break the numerology of that down, it creates 5. 5 is the freedom code, the sovereignty code. You take those nested platonic solids and you push them into the heart of the person's hologram that you're working with, the human being. When you push those platonic solids down and you activate that freedom code, another 18 streams of light come out from the hologram and create another wheel. They then go up into the pineal gland. Okay, another wheel of light is created. It feeds up into the alpha transmission center. At the top of your multi-dimensional light body, you've got your alpha transmission center. At the bottom, you've got your omega. Okay, the alpha and the omega, they run crystalline code that flows from one to the other, up and down the central column. Once this switches on, a whole other level of geometry encodes itself, but we'll come back to that in a minute. When the alpha transmission center gets activated, it sends frequency down through the omega, down through the planet and into Mother Earth's heart. Once Mother Earth's heart is activated, which is a Merkaba field, she connects to the frequency of 432 Hertz, which is the vibrational frequency of the heart. It's the vibrational frequency of Giza. It's the vibrational frequency of planet Earth. The resonance musical harmonic of the Earth and Giza pyramid are the same. Now, when you send this frequency back into Mother Earth's Merkaba, she pulls that codex in from the Earth and from the mathematics, the stone computer, amazing Stargate activator, whatever you want to call it. This pyramid is so many things, but it pulls the code and the mathematics into it. It then shoots the frequency back up into the human being's heart. Streams of light then flow out from the human being's heart into the 12 points on the multi-dimensional Merkaba field. They start to rotate, create a perfect sphere, plug back into the human's heart, which creates the number 13. The 12 points on the multi-dimensional Merkaba field plug in to 12 multi-dimensional chakras. The 13th, the sphere, plugs into the top transmission center, which flows up through the Aramatena gateway in the cradle of Lyra and into the God worlds, and it plugs you into that diamond light of pure source code, that original God intelligence, and it activates the God spark inside of your heart. And the God spark lies in the stargate of your heart, which itself is a multi-dimensional Merkaba field, which gives you access to the Garden of Eden, it gives you access to the Tree of Life, it gives you access to so many levels and layers of code, mathematics, different structures. Now, once this multi-dimensional Merkaba field activates around your body and inside your body, and the God spark is plugged in through the Aramatena gateway into the God worlds, your multi-dimensional chakras, they come online. Your alpha and your omega fire up properly. You start to upload magnetic code, you start to download electrical code. Flows into your heart. What this does, it activates 18 cylinders, which make up one big cylinder around your body. This cylinder has an in point and an out point, which plugs in to the alpha and the omega. Now, once this cylinder is activated, it rotates. Now, you're a multi-dimensional being, so what happens? You don't just have one cylinder activating, you have multiple cylinders, one around each different piece of your architecture. Now, when all these cylinders start to spin, they create a toroidal field. This toroidal field plugs into the toroidal field of planet Earth. This Cathara grid structure also plugs into 12 stargates on a planetary level, on a galactic level, on a universal level. Once those stargates are activated, the stargates run frequency into your kidneys, your liver, your spinal column, different components of your physical anatomy, and they activate transmission centers or chakras inside each organ. And there's 9 transmission centers in your kidneys, 9 in your liver, and so on. Now, once this whole system switches on, you literally upgrade. And to come back to the start of this process with the platonic solids going into the heart, it sets you free and activates this whole structure, and it raises your level of energy, raises your vibration, and switches you into a 5th dimensional frequency band. And your whole architecture changes. Your octahedron switches on, your icosahedron, your Cathara grid structure. You start to run the crystalline code at a spiralistic 45-degree rotation. And that is how you exit the time-based matrix. Now, this is where the really important piece of the puzzle comes in. Because when Metatron's cube was encoded and created to stop the falling consciousness, those 13 spheres were placed inside of it. The stargates plug into those spheres. The multi-dimensional Merkaba field plugs in, the Cathara grid plugs in, your DNA plugs into it. All these different levels of architecture, frequency, and code plug into that. Now, once you plug into Metatron's cube on that encoded 13 level, and you start to pull the constellations in, 3 constellations for each body part, 3 constellations for each zodiac sign, you start to pull that frequency into your body, and everything up levels again. Now, once your multi-dimensional Merkaba field is plugged into Metatron's cube, that crystal spiral is created within the cube, and then you can spiral out through the cube and exit. And you can take your physical body with you. Many years ago, because I questioned this stuff, I always question everything. You know, I was thrown into this from nowhere. I didn't used to believe in any of this stuff. When I was on Alpha Centauri and had this download of code, and then I end up in the pyramids with Thoth in these classrooms in these mystery schools, and he's showing me the same code that was on Alpha Centauri, I realized that, you know, there's an extraterrestrial, okay? An extraterrestrial that's been involved in all of this for billions of years. And if I go back to before I got taken up in the spacecraft, I was introduced to a friend of mine, the same guy whose pyramid I was meditating in the garden with, introduced me to St Germain. I didn't realize at the time that St Germain was Thoth until I got to the mystery schools and looked into his eyes, and I saw the very same being. Whenever we go in to heal someone, we always get a photo of someone and look into their eyes, because their eyes give you a complete readout. It's like a blueprint. So when I looked into Thoth's eyes in the mystery schools, I realized it was St Germain. What we're working with is extraterrestrial frequency. And all of these codes and these structures are extraterrestrial. They're off planet. All of these different geometries, codes, structures, all the numerology is encoded back to the stars. And for us to get off this planet, whether we're in a spacecraft going at 11.2 kilometers per second, moving through that 13 code at times the speed of sound, Mach 33. Or we're activating that crystal spiral, jumping into the stargates inside the King's Chamber, moving up through the bend in space-time. We're spiraling out through the 13 code, through the mathematics of 8, through that spiral, through that infinity sign, that never-ending loop. Because when you chuck frequency out into the space, it's always going to come back to you through the encoded 8, through that encoded infinity, never-ending frequency that just, whatever you put out is always going to find you again. That's why you have to be very responsible for your thoughts and your emotions, because you're putting it out into the world, you're putting it out into the ether, and you're encoding everything with every thought, emotion, every piece of action that you're taking. So this whole game is about healing. This whole game is about multidimensional travel, interdimensional travel. It's about recoding our bodies. As I was saying, many years ago, a young guy, he came to see me, and this is when I realized that what I was being shown by Thoth was the truth, that we were stuck inside this mathematical code. And the mathematical code was Metatron's cube, which was keeping us locked and stuck. And our bodies are supposed to be much bigger. I had a guy that came to see me, a young lad from Brazil. We didn't come to see me physically, but he contacted me through the internet, and I met him on Skype. He woke up one morning and his head was massive, but his brain, was still the same size. His skull was big. And he said to me, "Jerry, please help me shrink my skull back down. Every time I lie down, my brain drops against my skull, or if I run, it bounces, and it's very painful." And he said, "Look at me, I look stupid." So anyway, I met him on Skype and that, and I said to him, "Bro, why don't you grow your brain?" I didn't know how I was going to shrink his skull, but I didn't know how I was going to grow his brain. And I thought, he's been connecting with off-planet frequencies, and he's gone back to his normal extraterrestrial size, his angelic humanoid size. He said, "Jerry, you're crazy, look at me. My head is massive," and it was massive on his head, and he did look a bit funny, you know what I mean? But I just thought if he grows his brain, he's gonna have access to all of these amazing abilities, you know? Anyway, he didn't want to do it, so I ran him through this kaleidoscopic chromium frequency and Andromedan frequency we work with underneath the pyramids and healing chambers. It was like a futuristic MRI machine, and I watched his skull shrink. It went back to his normal size. This is when I realized that what I was being taught by Thoth in the mystery schools was true. Because we are running a false mathematical code. Nature, the trees, everything, it all looks beautiful, but it's millimeters out, maybe less than millimeters. But when you start at the 0 point and you fractalize out, as it grows further and further away from the 0 point, it gets further and further. Those little millimeters turn to centimeters and inches and so on. And the mathematical code gets even more distorted. And so when we're downloading frequency, vibration, mathematics, what happens is our codex is being re-engineered from the inside out, and the macro and the micro are the whole. So as we re-engineer our own code, the whole universe is being re-encoded. We've had so many people. Ryu, who's a 15-year-old beautiful soul, she's the daughter of one of our videographers, and she travels everywhere with us. She's beautiful. And we were in Egypt last year, and been through the pyramids for 16 days. We went out into a place called Fayum, a desert. We went to the old King's Hotel, and we did psilocybin for 5 days in ceremony. One night in the ceremony, I walked out the toilet, and I've seen Ryu, and she's massive. She's literally grown that much, like the last time I saw her 30 minutes earlier. And she wasn't happy because she's quite tall anyway, and she just said, "I don't like being this tall." But she connected with a certain frequency and grown to her extraterrestrial size. And I said, you know, if you don't like it, go and recode yourself. So she went back in, dropped into the space, and she shrunk herself back down again. We get people whose hands, feet grow. We get people whose bodies change, literally seconds, overnight, hours, just when they plug into those right codes and their DNA is kind of switched on. That junk DNA isn't junk. That junk DNA is full of magic, and it's vibration and sounds that create the magic. Certain light encoded frequencies, certain harmonics. Our bodies are mathematical instruments. And something that I was taught when we're in ceremony, when we're doing healing, we use light language. Like different frequencies, they literally tap the DNA of a human being. You can recode people's blueprints so quickly. There's so many different levels and layers to this stuff that I'm talking about. But what I was shown and what I truly know is real. is the fact that we're a shadow of our former selves. Our gene code has been manipulated. Over the course of billions of years, we've gone from our angelic, humanoid, extraterrestrial selves to these smaller versions of humans. We've still got all of the potential inside of us, but we need to re-engineer our mathematics. And so what we do with that R44, RX3 code is we use that mathematical 5 to set people free. And once you use those platonic solids and recode the whole architecture, plug into the 432 hertz of the frequency of planet Earth, of the pyramid, and you bring all of those sound frequencies back up, they vibrate at like an invisible, subtle sound level, and they recode the architecture, switch on the multidimensional Merkaba field, access the Cathara grid, the transmission centers switch on, everything starts to work. You plug into the stargates, and you literally become mathematically encoded. Then you step into your superhuman potential. This is what I remembered in the mystery schools with Thoth, and I'm learning all the time. And I'm only giving you like a snippet and a brief overview. There are so many more levels and layers to this, it's unbelievable. But this helps you understand that we are powerful and that we're dealing with a level of light in communication which is from the stars, billions of years old. And we as humans are discovering the clues that we left for ourselves a long time ago. We've been to this planet many times, we've reincarnated many times, and we were leaving clues for our future selves. That we were leaving clues for are the us in this now space. And we're rediscovering this mathematical architecture inside the pyramids, inside different sacred sites around the planet. I mean, Avebury in the UK is massive for me. You know, every time I go there, the Palladian connection I get is unbelievable. This is a whole other story. Underneath the pyramids in Egypt, when you go to the halls of Amenti, these ancient corridors, when you go through them, there are different plasma spheres, there are different electrical gateways, and if you stand in front of them, and depending on your own mathematical frequency, beams of light will come out of your pineal gland, plug into these different gateways and structures and plasma pores, and they will offer you the information that is right for you in that moment in time. When you get to the halls of Amenti, they've got different rooms. They're like architects' rooms, and you've got huge tables with holograms of stargates on, and they literally move these stargates around like billiard balls or pool balls or snooker balls on a pool table or a snooker table or a billiard table, and they can literally play with planets like that because everything's holographic, right? So there's so many different ways that you can go about this, but the pyramids, Thoth, these mystery schools, stargates, all of these mathematical pieces and components that I'm sharing with you are the codex to sovereignty and freedom. Wherever you are on planet Earth, don't believe a word I say. Go into your heart, meditate on this, connect with this stuff, ask to be shown. You have just the same access as that I have access. You've just got to be present enough to experience it because the information's all around you. I'm not special, neither are you. We're all equal on this planet. It just depends on the choices you make and the level and the depths of work and connection that you're prepared to go to. How patient can you be? How present can you get yourself? How still can you be to tap the multidimensional playing fields and the information that's available? Go out into this world and love your sisters and brothers fiercely and ferociously. Hug them tightly and never be the first to let go. And remember to check out our website, starmagichealing.org. We got some of the best ascension tools on planet Earth. Hundreds of guided meditations, light language transmissions, cosmic yoga videos, high frequency nutrition, mystery school teachings on all different subjects, Telegram groups so you can connect with beautiful souls just like you on the same ascension mission. Let's work together. Let's reunite as a soul family. Every Monday and Wednesday we meet online for activations and meditations. Get plugged into infinity, it's free for 7 days, and I will see you again real soon. We're sisters and brothers, beautiful soul. Remember that, know that. I love you. You're amazing. Go and be powerful. Speak your truth. Make up the rules of your own human game. Be who you want to be. Be who you are. Love yourself. Be fierce and ferocious within that love. Enforce your boundaries. Open your heart. Don't break your values for anyone. lean into the process of life, and be in joy, be in laughter, be like a little kid, having fun on this planet. And I'll see you again real soon. One love, one heart, one human family. Peace out, beautiful soul.